Dr. Wargo, can you please tell us more about the research questions that you're currently investigating and the research focus of your lab?
Of course, yeah. Please call me Jen, though. So our laboratory mainly focuses on trying to better understand response and resistance to melanoma therapy and also translating that to other cancers. And the way we've historically done that is by looking at data derived from patients and then taking that back to mouse models, doing mechanistic studies, and then bringing what we learned back to patients. And so really what we've been focusing on over the past decade or so is looking first at response and resistance to targeted therapy. We also have looked at response and resistance to immunotherapy and specifically to immune checkpoint blockade. And what we've come to learn is that there's a number of different factors which influence response. And one of the most exciting things that we're studying now is the role of the microbiome in response and resistance to cancer therapy. We actually have data to suggest that you could actually change the microbiome and improve responses.
That is so fascinating. Can you, so microbiome is such a buzzword these days and everybody's just wondering, what exactly is it?
Right, exactly.
So, okay, how would you describe microbiome to a novice like me who doesn't know anything about
Yes, yes. Well, it's fascinating. So in our bodies, we have over 100 trillion microbes or bacteria and viruses and other types of microbes, and they actually outnumber our normal cells by up to 10 to 1. And the largest proportion of these are in the gut. And so for many, many years, we've known about these microbes, and really the primary function originally was thought to be just digestion. You know, these bugs just sit in our gut and help us digest food. But what we've come to learn is that these bacteria and other microbes are actually influencing virtually every aspect of our physiology and really, first and foremost, really our immune systems. And so all along the vast surface area of the gut, which is lined with, which is populated by many different microbes, just on the other side of the epithelium, there's a dense network of immune cells. And so it's really kind of intuitive that these microbes could influence immune responses and responses to immunotherapy.
So you're basically studying the association between immune system and microbiome. It's such a fascinating topic to study, I would say. Yes. What exactly motivated you to get here or follow a career path like this where you can ask such interesting questions?
Yes. So I think early on my career path was shaped in my childhood. My mother was a nurse and my dad taught mathematics as a math professor. And so when I was growing up, I was really immersed in that kind of an environment where from scientific investigation and really the pursuit of knowledge as well as taking care of people. And so when I was a kid, I used to go around with my mom and see patients. She was a visiting nurse, and so I really learned early on just how rewarding that could be. Was inspired by one of my professors, and he really wanted me to go on and do a little bit more science, and he was like, Jen, you really ought to think about medicine. And so I continued to work as a nurse, but then pursued a bachelor's degree in biology and totally loved what I was doing. And so wanted to take it to the next level, and so entered into medical school and then wound up in general surgery, where I was, interestingly, during medical school, I was studying the immune, let me start that again. Sorry, guys. See? Retake. Okay. So interestingly, in medical school, I was studying the immunosuppressive effects of biliary obstruction and got interested in surgery and immunology, and then went into my residency at Harvard and then became very interested in studying cancer.
That has been so long journey, different experiences and different motivations at each time. So now when you're fighting with cancer and when you were back as a nurse, what self-fulfillment do you see when you find something like you have found recently? You published a lot of papers, seminal papers this year that suggest that microbiome does predict resistance to immunotherapy or predict response to immunotherapy. So how does this satisfy your inner nurse part towards patient care and towards the care of patients?
Yeah, well, it's incredibly rewarding. I mean, we're all here to help each other out on this earth, and I think we're here to help our patients, and that's my primary motivation, is really to help patients with melanoma and other cancers through this journey. And I think it's incredibly rewarding to see those patients in clinic. I still see patients every week and do surgery every week, but I also can then take what problems I identify in the clinic back to the laboratory and study those. And that's exactly what we did with the microbiome. I had seen data presented at one of the annual meetings of the immunotherapy conference and was really inspired by that. That was data that was presented in mice that showed that depending on what the gut microbiome looked like in mice, it could actually influence whether or not the mice responded to immunotherapy for melanoma.
Can we say that is one of the most awaited clinical trials in the history of melanoma?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think so.
And so fascinating to hear the results and see how the study goes.
Yes, and we'll even see data from one of the early trials today from another group, which is outstanding. You know, it's so nice to see. I mean, I think that's something else that's been incredibly rewarding, is being able to work with others worldwide, and you know, through the Society of Melanoma Research and other organizations to really accelerate and translate these findings.
Absolutely. So you mentioned briefly about your clinical duties as you follow with patients, as well as you're doing fantastic research. So how do you actually maintain the balance between becoming a scientist and acting as a clinician at times?
Right. Well, I think it takes an incredible team of people to really help the patients and also to do the research in the lab. And so, you know, if I'm a champion of many people in the lab and then also of many people in the clinic, and without those people, I wouldn't be able to do anything, right? And so I think what enables me to help advance melanoma therapy is all the amazing people that work with me. And so, you know, the research nurses, all the physician assistants, other people within the clinic who are really seeing the patients, identifying the issues, really helping with all the large number of things that we need to do, and we see patients every day, but then also having an amazing team of investigators in the research lab who can keep really advancing the science even while I'm in the clinic or in the OR or traveling to talks all over the world. So,
speaking of team science, you have been a champion of team science and actually advocate for team science. What exactly are the effective strategies to pursue a team science?
Yeah, I think team science is really critical to advancing the field, and I think the most important thing is to realize that we're stronger together, if you will, and that the best way to really help our patients is not by hoarding data, but to actually share data. The end game is really to help people, and so how best do we do that? It's absolutely through team science.
Yeah, I think throughout the journey, scientists do forget that the end game is about, at least in melanoma, is about helping patients. It's not about getting grants, manuscript. In the end, if your findings do translate into clinics, that is an achievement in itself.
Definitely.
Okay, so the next question will be towards, some of the question will be representation of women in science. So what are your thoughts on representation of women in science? I mean, this has been a very much debated topic over the past 2 years or 3 years.
Yeah. And I think the data is there that women are underrepresented in science, and there's a number of variables that affect that. I think women haven't necessarily been afforded the same opportunities, but I think hopefully that's changing, and I think certainly through SMR that hasn't been the case, and through MRA and other organizations, thankfully. But I think we do need to change this, and we need to change it at a couple different levels. I think we need to create new opportunities for women in science that will actually facilitate them to be able to do really high impact science. And also, I think we need a grassroots level where we support one another as all investigators, not just women in science, but women and men really support each other at a grassroots level so that we can really do high impact, really strong research together.
So it's like the way to promoting women would be to have a team science approach where you come together and do amazing research and help patients in the end.
Right. I think there is a need, though, for special opportunities and for some, because it has been many years that women have been underrepresented, and in some ways it's a choice. I think as women stereotypically are often asked to take on the role, and I have kids of my own, but to really be the person in a relationship who raises the kids and does a lot of the aspects around that. Now, that does take a lot of time and effort, and so women in science sometimes don't want to necessarily really compromise on that aspect of their life in order to really work as hard as they possibly can to meet a funding level of 8%, right? So it's challenging, and so I think how can we enable more women to really pursue strong academic careers? I think it's going to be by offering them more support, by also kind of changing a paradigm where there's more kind of shared responsibility in all of life, and not just in raising children and other aspects. But it's tricky because it's like there's so many rewarding things in life, and science is definitely one of them. But I can tell you, kids are amazing too. And so, I think we just need to, really enjoy ourselves in life, but take care of each other, and also importantly for those of us who are willing to do so, to really take on the challenge of advancing the field of science.
Great. That is such a wonderful perspective about this. The next question was towards, so you published a seminal paper this year in January on microbiome, which was released in November. So it has been a big success in terms of moving the field ahead. But what we don't know is how much of the effort went into publishing that paper. So would you like to shed some light on how much of the effort was put into getting that discovery out? Right.
Well, I think that is like the ultimate team science paper, and basically, again, I had been working with a team at Harvard when we first kind of started working on the microbiome, but we did it unknowingly, where we were studying first melanoma and stromal-mediated resistance to melanoma, and found a secreted factor from stromal cells that was mediating therapeutic resistance, but then turned to another stromal cell line system for pancreatic cancer, and we actually found that in tumors of patients with pancreatic cancer, you could actually identify bacteria, and so and they were mediating resistance to chemotherapy, and that's really how we started to study the microbiome. And so we focused on the tumor microbiome for many years, and it was only when I saw Tom Gajewski's work presented at SITC that we really started to think about the gut microbiome. But I was completely floored when I saw the data, and really knew that we needed to study this in patients. And so came home to MD Anderson, and thankfully with the Melanoma Moonshot effort, there's a huge team of individuals who are really poised to help, and that's what it takes with this. And so was able to mobilize all the forces to collect samples from patients going on to therapy, and to really make this seminal observation that patients with the favorable microbiome had better responses to treatment. Now, importantly, I think it's a global effort, though, because I had presented our data early on at a meeting, and Laurent Zitvogel, of course one of the pioneers of microbiome work herself, came up to me after my talk and said, "Jennifer, we need to talk because we have very similar data." And so that's how, and then Tom Gajewski, we also engaged with Tom Gajewski, and that's how those 3 papers were published together. It was because we shared data well before these papers were published. We coordinated, we compared notes, and we worked together to help each other and to help our patients by really showing these findings together, rather than really trying to be the first one or the only one who published the seminal findings. So I think hopefully there is a shift and in vision for investigators, and a realization that by teaming up and by sharing data and really kind of combining cohorts, sometimes even, you get a lot more strength out of that.
I think that's a fantastic team effort model. Really, that is a very useful advice for research trainees as well in future. If they are planning to do some studies, then that is the way to go about it. Wonderful. So we'll start with this final set of questions, which are towards the trainees and SMR meeting. So what would be the key few advice points that you would like to give to young trainees like me, or especially women?
Well, I think, stay enthusiastic. I think one of the main things in science is sometimes it can be hard, right? You're working long hours sometimes. I think it's a journey, and the answer isn't always there right in front of you, and there's bumps along the way with regard to different assays not working and things. But if you can keep your vision and focus and remain enthusiastic and optimistic, I think that's really critical. I think choosing a good mentor, being in a good environment, looking at productivity from the group is really important, and making sure it's a good fit for you, I think, is really key. I think as far as individual research studies, I think it's important to have a few irons in the fire, if you will, some safe, different types of projects, but then really some high impact, high reward, but high risk. Yeah, I think is important, and something like the microbiome was a risky project. Maybe your PI has been studying a certain molecule for years and years, but you can start that with a basis, but kind of think of novel aspects. Look to even other scientific fields and say, okay, how might that aspect of science apply to what I'm studying? And how can I move this forward in my own novel way? And so those are the pieces of advice I would give to trainees.
Great, those are really wonderful advice, I would say. So finally, about the SMR meeting. You have been the charm of SMR Society as you delivered a fantastic keynote lecture this year. So what do you enjoy the most? Firstly, how long has it been for you to coming to SMR meeting?
Gosh, it's been at least maybe a decade or more, I think, so it's been phenomenal. And I think, it's an amazing community of investigators, patient advocates, pharma, I think, and we're all here for the patients, and I think that's very apparent. That's what I love about SMR. I think, it's a great group of individuals with a very, very wise and common goal, and so I couldn't be happier than to be here at SMR.
And can you describe some of the experiences that you have had at SMR has hugely benefited your research?
Yeah, definitely. I think all of our really most seminal findings have first been presented at SMR, including the work that we showed with regard to the early on treatment biopsies. I think it's given one of the main real pluses of SMR. It's a really intimate meeting, and so it's not too huge, and you can really get good feedback. And so trainees who come to SMR often get podium talks, which is outstanding. And also, you look at half or more of the talks are from selected abstracts rather than from chosen speakers, and that's a real win, I think, because it's nice to see that, and to have people submit abstracts and actually get podium presentations is really outstanding.